A friend of mine gave me mushrooms for the first time in a ceremony because I need like a container space and not for fun. So when I took it, the mushrooms told me, we are the neurons of this planet. We have been weaving the memories of this planet since the very beginning. All living beings are connected with us. So if you want to speak with the planet, you have to speak through us. Since then, the connectivity has been increasing for too much. So I clearly think that it's a powerful tool because it's an extension of the planet and we are chemicals, they are chemicals, and the combination of this creates such a beautiful expansion of consciousness to understand and to see and think and feel everything that we are right now just in the stage of childhood, like a kid playing with food. So I think that humanity today using it in a fun way is like a kid playing with food, and eventually they will know the importance of eating properly. It's actually a tool that can shift mind, that can shift body, that can transform everything.
Welcome to Modern Enlightenment, a sanctuary for your soul, where we'll go on a path of personal and spiritual development. I'm Austin Mao.
And I'm Chuchu Wang. We are your companions on this journey of self-discovery and spiritual connection.
Join us as we delve into the fusion of modern psychotherapy, neuroscience, psychospirituality, and shamanic plant sacrament ceremonies, exploring the transformative potential of psychedelics for the mind, body, and spirit.
Our mission is to guide you to a place of profound awareness where emotions can be felt.
Together, let's illuminate the way to a brighter, more enlightened existence.
Modern Enlightenment, where your journey to inner peace begins.
So it's great to be here with Austin Mao and also with my good friend Matias Stefano, and Austin's a new friend. And we're here to talk about psychedelics and the psychedelic experience and the role that it plays in raising consciousness. And I've had personal experiences that have been very powerful with it. I hadn't on my own been on, any psychedelic journeys until about 2 years ago. Up until that time, I used geometry as a way to basically create my own natural psychedelic experience. Drawing geometry has this effect, and it did definitely play a role in my spiritual awakening. And you could have natural DMT production. But then I was introduced to psilocybin, and psilocybin has had a profound impact on, I would say, I honestly feel like my own IQ has probably increased by about 20 to 25 points as a result of psilocybin. And that's not an exaggeration. And I know Matias has definitely probably gone up a lot as well. I've seen it happen. And it's a very powerful medium for us to be able to expand our awareness and start to see things and to experience things that are in higher dimension that we may not have been aware of before. So I'm excited to be here to have this conversation with the two of you. And I want to start off just by asking, what has been your initial experiences with either psilocybin or any other psychedelics that have had a profound impact on you? And what was that turning point that led to you getting into them in the first place?
Thanks, Robert. First, I think it's worth noting, just for those tuning in, that we're in Antarctica. And prior to this, we hadn't actually formally met, even, some of our circles across paths and Burning Man, et cetera. So just really excited to make this impromptu recording here in the seventh continent, the end of the world. Yeah.
The end of the world as we know it.
Yeah. So I'm Austin. I'm founder of Ceremonia, a nonprofit and legal psychedelic sanctuary in Colorado. I had a number of psychedelic experiences that impacted my life, but the one that really stands out is my first ceremony. And this happened in Mexico, where I was invited to an ayahuasca ceremony that was a retreat for founders. By that time, I had already been a Burning Man many years, had about 100 different recreational psychedelic experiences. So I went in thinking it was a networking opportunity. What could this show me that I haven't already seen? And for those that have ever sat with ayahuasca, well, it's absolutely not a networking opportunity unless you're networking with God. And in my first experience, the first ceremony that I had an experience of being held by my mother, a vision of it, and experiencing this expansive feeling of love and warmth and safety that I didn't have a memory of. And then I had a vision of introducing my then wife to my father with past 4 years prior. And I didn't even know I was missing that in my life, to be able to share the joys of my life from that point on with him. I thought I had properly grieved him. But then it was in the second ceremony that I went in with the intention of exploring my memories, because I think, unlike most people, my childhood was almost a total fog. I could just remember bits and pieces, but nothing glued together. And when I started going into that experience after drinking ayahuasca, I was reliving my memories in vivid detail. I remember turning my locker combination in high school, carrying around and feeling the pages in books. Back and back and back in time until I was a child under sheets. I was engulfed in darkness, and then I felt horny. So I pop up in the middle of the jungle. I'm on a yoga mat. There's 49 other people. My friend Connor's over there. He's half naked, running around, screaming. And I'm like, what is this? And when I go back in, I realized that I was sexually touched as a boy in a way that no child ever should be. And I literally said, oh my God. And I started going forward in time with this new information. Not only that I had this traumatic experience, but that I had repressed that experience and repressed all my memory. I was a bully as a kid. I had sexual confusion as a teenager, and I couldn't really hold down passions or relationships because I would just simply forget. And from that, my memory came back flooding into me. It's like something out of a movie, What's interesting is I studied psychology and had read about repressed memory. I never thought that I would be the textbook example. And when I woke, I talked to the shaman, our facilitator, and I shared with her what happened. And she said, oh my God, I'm so sorry. And I said, no, you don't understand. I feel like I was cured of Alzheimer's. And that was the moment that heralded the renaissance of my life. I started writing poetry again, which I read to you guys earlier. I hadn't written in more than 13 years. I started creating again. I started investing and devoting myself into long-term passions and relationships, including music. And what I know now is I was living a fraction of who I truly am before, So why I'm doing what I'm doing is to share this extraordinary experience that can really only be felt, really only experienced.
It's interesting. Did you feel like that also accompanied a massive heart opening for you?
100%. But here's the funny thing. I don't know if this might have been the case for you, but before I went to that retreat, I was agnostic, bordering atheist. And when someone would say the word vibration to me, I would throw up a little in my mouth. I was just like, that is so woo-woo. That doesn't mean anything. And now I finally understand, through my own experience, maybe what they're pointing at, maybe something that you two are pointing at. And so your question here, did it open my heart? I didn't even know what that meant because I didn't know what it felt like. And now I have a greater felt sense of what my heart feels like, moment to moment, day to day, and through difficult experiences too.
For myself, it definitely had a huge impact on the opening of my heart. And I remember after the first time I did mushrooms, I was like, oh my gosh, everyone in the world should do this. What a different world this might be if everybody just felt that kind of heart opening and the expansive love that you can experience. And I really do believe that when we are able to express a higher love, especially authentically for ourselves and for the world around us, then one that basically is constantly looking for being right, or this desire we have to be finding an objective truth, when love can supersede that, and true authentic love, and that means you have to understand the dark aspects as well of yourself and the world around you, then that is when you really are at the doorstep of going into the next level of consciousness. And I think, it's such an important role that, in particular, I think mushrooms should be, people talk about, CBD and cannabis and marijuana and all that stuff as being kind of the gateway. I actually think that psilocybin is the more powerful gateway into higher consciousness. What do you think, Matias?
Well, for those who don't know me, I basically feel like I was born in mushrooms. So all my life I had this connection and feeling and seeing other realities, and since I was a child. And as I was growing up, it was even more and more and more. My brain was finding colors and geometry and patterns and information and memories and going backwards in time more and more. So it was very intense. I was born in an agnostic family, so no one believed in anything in my family. They thought I was just creative, of course. Also, we don't speak about spirituality. So I tried to escape spirituality all the time because I wanted to explain it in a logical way. But I was very woo. So it was impossible for me to actually hide from that. So I tried with all my effort to not to be spiritual all the time. And I said, okay, everything that I remember, everything that I feel needs to be applied in politics, in society. I want to be a teacher in schools. So I wanted to educate and help people, other kids or stuff like that. So I was doing a documentary once we were filming in Miami, a documentary for a new society and how economics would work and everything. We were filming with this guy, I don't remember the name, but the Venus Project in Florida. It was an architect. So I was walking in the street after filming, and one of my guides from the fifth dimension show up in a corner in Miami, which is weird. It was like, what is happening? And he said, you are totally disconnected. You have lost your track. You have to go back to yourself. So go back to South America and do ayahuasca. I said, no. We were fighting for 3 months. No, I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to do that. And in my head, I had this preconcept of these things can take you away from your mind, or you can get lost, or that it's drugs. And I have my own connection, so I don't need anything else, stuff like that. So many things happened to me when I came back to Argentina, and it pushed me to Chile to do my first ayahuasca ceremony. Basically, they stole everything from me, like literally, my IDs, everything. I was left with nothing in Chile. And my guide said, now you can start from zero. So they took everything away from me so I could begin again. I did my first experience. And in that ceremony that I was a little bit afraid because I was a channel and I could see the darkness and the light. But I was afraid what would happen if I cannot control with my mind what is happening. So, but then I accepted that I needed to let myself go. And in that moment, from 30% of my connection, it went to 80% of connection and understanding. And I remember that ayahuasca, one of the things that told me was, why do you think you're a human? Why do you separate from everything? Even if you remember that we are one. I was like, well, I think I became too much a human. So basically, it explained me how he said, you need water and food to live. So why would you go against something that gives food to your mind? So it was like, there are chemical elements that you need for your body to function, for your cells to function. So there are other chemicals that are good for your brain to function, to expand. And so it taught me about every chemical and every component that was inside of me and showed me you're not a human, you're just an extension of Earth. And a few years after, which is a year ago, what happened was a friend of mine gave me mushrooms for the first time in a ceremony because I need like a container space and not for fun. So when I took it, the mushrooms told me, we are the neurons of this planet. We have been weaving the memories of this planet since the very beginning. All living beings are connected with us in many different ways. So if you want to speak with the planet, you have to speak through us. So since then, the connectivity has been increasing for too much, like never before. So I clearly think that it's a powerful tool because it's an extension of the planet and we are chemicals, they are chemicals, and the combination of this creates such a beautiful expansion of consciousness to understand and to see and think and perceive and feel everything that we are right now just in the stage of childhood, like playing with it, like a kid playing with food. So I think that humanity today using it in a fun way is like a kid playing with food. And eventually they will know the importance of eating properly. It's actually a tool that can shift mind, that can shift body, that can transform everything.
Wow. So going beyond psilocybin, like what other things have you found very helpful in kind of your expansion of consciousness beyond psilocybin and ayahuasca that you already mentioned, Matias?
Of course, ayahuasca and acacia.
Can you take a moment and talk a little bit about acacia?
Yeah. Well, of course, that most of the people connect with ayahuasca because it's the South American plant that connects you with the traumas. I feel like most of the people that understand the importance of the ceremony in this, as we were talking today, it was more about traumas. Like people are trying to heal. Most of the willingness of change is because I have a trauma, I have a problem, and I need to heal. And so ayahuasca is very good on holding you and showing you, as happened to you, this is what happened, and it's hidden in your brain, and we can heal it in this way. So that's why I think it's very important for people that are trying to heal. Acacia is different. It's a tree from Middle East and Africa, and you reach that tree when you want to literally sit in front of God and talk in a way that is more information, and it's not about trauma, it's about connection with the everything. And so I think that both of them are very good to connect heaven and earth somehow. So my experience with Acacia has been more like sitting and having a conversation with God, and God meaning everything, and understanding so many things. So those are the three things that told me we are your way. And whenever I tried something different, I felt the mushrooms inside and Acacia inside saying, don't you ever try something that is not in tune. So it was like, okay. So that was my limit.
Interesting. A lot of people talk about ayahuasca as being kind of like grandmother, right? And it has a gender association to it, abuela. Huachuma is often referred to as abuelo, grandfather. What would you say is the gender association, if any, to Acacia? Or is it genderless?
I think it's genderless. It's everything.
There are so many psychedelics, right? And I think it's a question I often get asked, what is good for what? And I remember when I was living in Costa Rica during the pandemic, I was on a Zoom call with Rick Doblin, who's the founder and director of MAPS, the leading nonprofit legalizing psychedelics to the FDA, et cetera. And so I get on the Zoom call, and first of all, there's a giant green bong in the back. And I'm like, Rick, you realize there's a bong in your camera, right? And he's like, yeah, that's my filtering mechanism. And I asked Rick, based on your many years of study and research, what's the best psychedelic you could say for psychotherapeutic work, right? He told me what he's discovered, it's not really the compound that matters as much as how long the psychedelic experience is. For example, with ayahuasca, it's about a 4 to 6 hour experience, depending on dosage. LSD being, 8 to 12 hours. And so there's the meaning making that I have around that is that the longer that you're in the experience, the more processing that you can do. That being said, in my own personal experience, different psychedelics offer different experiences, right? And I just had Robin Carr-Harris on our podcast called Modern Enlightenment. And Robin's the leading researcher. He runs the Carr-Harris lab named after him in UC San Francisco. And he just made a post that ketamine is not a true psychedelic, right? And it's something that I think is really valuable to express, that even though it's technically a psychedelic and the first one to be legalized in the United States in 2019, it doesn't provide the same level of experience that psilocybin or DMT/ayahuasca has. And so, on this original question of like what psychedelics are out there and, what is the value of them, I think there are a lot of things available. I believe that maybe you could say the entryway that is most accessible is psilocybin mushrooms. I mean, you can literally find it growing, in your backyard if you live in the right place,
Let's talk about ketamine for a moment, because, I think of all of the quote unquote psychedelics, it's probably become the most, let's say, recreational in the last few years, I would say. Although there have been some studies and a lot of work on, some of the health benefits of it as well, and particularly in mental health. And I'd love to know your thoughts on, it seems to be that with all the recreational use, there's kind of a natural blowback and resistance that's now coming in around ketamine that I'm definitely noticing. And I'd love to hear your thoughts on that, Austin.
Yeah, that blowback, I think, was most felt when Matthew Perry passed at a high concentration of ketamine in his blood.
I think in his particular case, and I might be wrong on this, but I think he was in a bathtub or something, or a hot tub, and he ended up drowning. And I mean, when you take that, why would you be in a hot tub or a bathtub when you take that much ketamine, like an injected dose? It's kind of, you're dissociated. So you literally can become somewhat paralyzed.
Yeah, right. I mean, first, hot tubs are awesome. There's one upstairs. Being a hot tub in Antarctica. But that aside, yes, I agree with you. And that's exactly right. It's a dissociative. Ketamine, I think, has tremendous value in certain applications. Number one, it's legal and accessible, right? In order to serve ketamine legally in the United States, you just need to be a nurse practitioner or prescribing psychiatrist or doctor. And so it's fairly widely available. You just Google Maps a ketamine clinic, you can probably find one close to you. And so as a gateway to a psychedelic experience or an altered state of consciousness, I think there's value in that. But the way I look at it is that in this pursuit of what we call enlightenment, which is often described in what words can be described as extraordinary bliss or peace or state of connection, I believe there are three aspects to enlightenment. Wholeness, which is the reconstitution of all the parts that I've suppressed or repressed or projected out, that I didn't meet in myself, all my anger, all my shame, all my guilt. Like I find the okayness in it and embrace that with my own self-compassion, self-love. That's what I would call wholeness. The second is nothingness, which is what Ram Dass calls becoming nobody. I think you guys use that terminology too. The loss of identity, which is the barrier between me and the other. Me and you is what we hold as our egoic identity and our belief systems, right? It could be the difference between Christian and Muslim. It could be the difference between vanilla and chocolate. There is some separation. And the third, I think, is oneness or allness, which is the connection between what we can experience as spirituality or divinity in all living beings. I think psilocybin and ayahuasca work really well on the level of wholeness, which is like helping us meet the challenging parts that we struggle to meet consciously. I think ketamine works on the level of nothingness, which is dissolving ourselves, right? Dissociating ourselves from our identity, from who we experience as ourselves. And I believe that LSD works really well on the level of oneness or allness, which is unitary consciousness. With that said, losing yourself, I think, can be really addictive, right? Because instead of actually facing the hard shit, I now pull back away from it. Now, I've worked with a number of combat veterans, right? And for them, like ketamine can be really valuable as a first application because there was someone who came who relived an experience of their friend getting blown up in front of him. I mean, that's an extraordinarily traumatic experience. And so being able to like see that at a little bit of a distance with a dissociative can allow you to meet that with greater fullness with something like psilocybin. But if you keep dissociating from the thing, then you start dissociating from life, from your experience, from all emotion, and becoming a shell of yourself. So beware of that property. It's not biochemically addictive, but I think it can be very...
I'm not sure if we have enough knowledge on that to know that it's not addictive. I mean, I think it's one of the recreational psychedelics, quote unquote, that quite a few people will tend to take by themselves and try to experience. It has the effect of dilating time as well. So you can experience, you can literally make time stand still, which is kind of an amazing feeling, right? That dissociation feeling could be really incredible. And then also when you do a deeper journey, it has, you can also, quote unquote, meet God in that, like literally feel like you're dissolved all the way down. But that comes along with other, I think physician administered LSD as well as mushrooms and probably MDA or MDMA.
I think bufo is better.
Yeah. So bufo, that's where I was going to go to next. But I do think that we do have to be careful with ketamine. I think it is definitely kind of on the fringe now of becoming more a gateway. And I prefer mushrooms as kind of the gateway. And before I go to that, I'd like to talk about the first experience on mushrooms for people, because one of the things that I've noticed a lot lately is that people were saying, oh yeah, I did mushrooms for the first time. It was this administered thing and I started off with 8 grams. And they're like, oh my God, like I had this like nightmarish experience and it took me like a year to get out of it type of thing. And I don't agree with that at all. I think that whenever someone asks me about mushrooms, the first thing I want to say to them is, look, if you really would like to try it, right, then I'm going to give you such a small dose that you're going to be saying to me, I don't feel it, can I have more? And then maybe the next time we do it or we do it together, then I'll give you a bit more. And every time that has been the experience, everyone has a great experience. Whenever I have, heard about somebody having one of these large dose first time experiences, definitely turns out to be something that they're kind of like, wait a minute, I regretted it at first. And then later on, I kind of got my head wrapped around it and I was able to get past it. And now I actually think it was a good experience, but they didn't have a good experience all the way through. I've never even done 8 grams, put it that way. The biggest dose I've ever done is probably 5. And that was already on the borderline of unpleasant.
Yeah, I know facilitators that serve 15 grams to veterans for their first time, which is, just for those that are not in the know, somewhere between 3.5 and 5 grams of mushrooms is what you would call a heroic dose, which is a dose of complete dissolution of self that's available, right? One of the core reasons why I do what I do in Ceremonia and what Ceremonia is really based on is this notion of what we call inside-out mastery, which is helping support you to develop safety in your system before you take a psychedelic. 2 things that are really important is skills and capacity. If you try to go ski down a mountain right now, what do you want to do? Maybe best way is to take some lessons, right? Starts on the bunny slope and then the green and then the blue and then graduate up to the black diamond, right? You're building your capacity to hold more of that experience. The same thing goes for psychedelics. And so what are the skills that we can learn so that we can hold more of our experience? I believe that this is nothing new. And the primary skill sets are mindfulness through thousands of years of meditation practices that have been passed down orally, then through books, then through teachers, right? We draw a lot from the Buddhist traditions there. And second is psychotherapeutic tools, which are now intersecting with mindfulness in what's called the third wave of psychology, an integrative model of mind, body, spirit. The most well-known framework now that is most paired with psychedelic assisted therapy is called internal family systems, parts work. So if you ever use the language, a part of me feels this or a part of me feels that, it's a lot giving us the vocabulary and the tools to be able to detect what is protecting me from myself, from my own feelings. As an example, one of the most common parts for particularly in the masculine, when my partner comes to me and she's full of emotion, right? What's the worst thing that the guy can do? Is say, here's how I can fix the problem for you, right? Here's the checklist of things that you need to do. What's actually underneath for me in that situation is a part of me called the fixer part, which is the one that wants to fix problems. But what's really that part is trying to protect is me feeling guilty that I hurt her, let's say, or me feeling angry at some injustice or whatever it is that's underneath that is the feeling that it's trying to protect. And so rather than come from the part that's mansplaining, right? I could take a breath, make a relationship with that part, ask it to relax back, and then investigate deeper into what's underneath that. Those skills help me build the capacity to hold more experience so that when you're taking a hero's dose of a psychedelic, you feel more empowered, safer to go deeper. And with greater sense of safety, you're actually able to go a lot deeper with the psychedelic. Same with meditation, right? Do you guys meditate?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So, but if you try to meditate in a hostile environment, let's say super noisy or super cold, it's much more difficult. Yes.
The super cold part was yesterday.
Same thing goes with the psychedelic, right? It's set and setting. What set and setting maps to is your inner sense of safety and your outer sense of safety. Mindset is how safe do I feel to be with my own emotions, my own stories, whatever comes through me, right? And setting is how safe do I feel to be in this container with these people, with these facilitators, with all these people tripping balls together, And if I don't feel safe, well, either I can blast through that wall with 8 grams of mushrooms, right? Which is super risky. You're rolling the dice on your mental, physical, and spiritual health, or can just not feel it as much. Or you could have what I often see, particularly in ayahuasca, when they're unsafe containers, as really ungrounded mystical experiences, aka high-fiving aliens. And they're just, the meaning making that they find is not deeply impacting their well-being,
We don't need psychedelics for that. High-fiving aliens.
I wanted to add to this that, well, regarding what you were talking about, ketamine at the beginning, I think that ketamine is the McDonald's of psychedelics. Like, it's a fast food that is easier, but eventually it's not nourishing. And the others are nourishing you in many different levels. Sometimes it's not about the dose or the quantity. It's not about, okay, try this. But as you said, the container and the aspect of the ceremony. Like, for example, a meal in the States, this is different, but Italian, Argentinian, you have to sit together with the family to eat. I never understood in the States when people go with the food and eat standing everywhere. These things that happen in some houses that everyone is eating at their whatever time. I feel very confused because as Italian, Argentinians, like, we have to sit all together. We have to be around the table, seeing the faces of each other. Maybe it's a cultural thing. But in terms of ceremony, it's like when someone take mushrooms, let's say, and everyone does whatever around, the energy can be dispersed. And also the experience might be good, but it's not deep in the connectivity of why you are doing this. Let's say a forest, every tree is growing by itself, but they are holding the roots. They all connect somehow. The mushrooms, they are all connected on the ground. They're all one constantly. So they are creating like a space of ceremony where they hold each other. And there's like a structure that they use in order to contain that power. So it's like saying, oh, I have I don't know, an infinite amount of power, but I will just leave it here. You can use it, like whoever wants to use it. But if you put it all together with a specific container, that gives also focus to the mind, which is very important to have a reason why I'm doing this. What is the center of my ceremony? Maybe it's just, I don't know, a stone or something where I can put my eyes on and focalize, where my mind don't get lost. When we start to look outside, or it could be a good experience because we all had like a good experience by walking around and feeling. That's one of the steps. But when you sit in ceremony, when you sit in the same table or in the ground, or the shamans do, that is what gives the power of the connectivity to access to more data in your brain by focalizing the energy and not dispersing the energy. And I think that's something very important of the connection between why to take mushrooms or any psychedelics, but with a specific purpose and a structure to hold that potential instead of dispersing it.
I think that word ceremony is actually really important, right? Like the difference between a date and a wedding, right? Like you could go on a date to the movies and have some popcorns together, but a wedding is sacred. That's something that you remember, right? So just like you could take mushrooms with friends, microdosing in Antarctica, or have an experience that is there with intentionality. We are setting clear boundaries, right? And we're either going deeply inwards or creating together, or whatever the intention is.
Mm-hmm.
And that's not just semantics, right? I think it's got to be truly grounded with the intention, because otherwise it's just drug, sex, and rock and roll. And the new way to describe recreational drug, sex, and rock and roll for, I think, too many circumstances is, medicine, union, and festival, community of some sort. So it's like, I think this whole thing is such an important aspect of it. So recently I had a friend, two stories. One I want to bring up. The first one is that there was a pretty well-known, former tech person who decided to become an ayahuasquero, and he did it for 4 years and, was doing 2-3 sessions a week and ended up with psychosis. And about 2 weeks ago, went to meet with his ex-wife, who they'd recently split up, I guess, and decided to burn their house down. Had a complete psychotic break. The police were not able to keep him in prison because he posted bail. And then he went searching for his ex. And, of course, no one in their sane contextual reference point could have really wanted to do that because it's completely estranged him from his children and everything. I think this psychotic phenomenon of people that are doing a lot of ayahuasca is something I'm also hearing a bit more about. And I'd love to hear if you've heard anything like this. And then also the second part of this is that I have a friend who was kind of co-hosting with a container that wasn't very secure. Let's put it this way. It was a leaky container. It was a mushroom ceremony. And one of the people that was in this ceremony ended up with what everyone described as a demonic possession experience. And it was like almost an exorcism, and everybody was freaked out. There was about an hour. The first hour was fine. And then I think they were doing about 5 grams, which I would still say is for first time is pretty high. And so I'd love to hear your thoughts on that, because I asked you about this earlier when we first started on the trip, and you kind of had a very unique answer. I'll let you answer, but I really liked the way you put it. And so, these leaky containers, and no one knew what to do in that circumstance. And it just turned into a very unpleasant experience. And, people were terrified. And then I got a phone call about it. And they were kind of asking me what I thought I should do. And I'm like, I'm not an expert in this area. But these both seem more like psychotic type break circumstances. I'd love to hear your thoughts on it.
I think it's important not to relate directly the medicine, because otherwise a lot of people would think, oh, it was that created this. It would say like everyone that had been abused as a child, it's then someone that will abuse. Something, of course, related to that person that has to work.
It's not causal, but it's corollary.
Yeah.
Psychedelics can be tricky. And one of the things I'd like to share, we have one of Colorado's first licensed practitioner trainings to legally license people to serve psilocybin and DMT, which includes ayahuasca. And so much of my mission has been to craft the concept of teaching how to do this. So I'd like to just impart a few things I've learned. The first is my belief that if you're doing a bunch of psychedelics and you're still an asshole, you're probably doing it wrong. The second is that, what are we doing this for? And in my opinion, what we are doing this for is for two reasons. One, I think, is selfish, which is I feel the greatest amount of joy and connection and peace when I am in service to others. And I admit to myself that even though my service is a gift to other people, it's not profit, I receive something tremendous, devoting my life for that feeling that I get to feel. And every spiritual tradition agrees on a few things. And one of those things, whether it's Christianity or Buddhism, is that the path of service is the path to God. The second thing is that the psychedelic experience can be really self-reinforcing. So one of the presidents of Unity Church, a Christian megachurch, came through our ceremonies. I love this man. He had a picture of Jesus. He kind of looks like Jesus on his altar, right? And in his experience, he had an experience of Jesus and Christ consciousness, what he claimed to be the most he's ever experienced Christ consciousness by far. And it reinforced and really helped him create a much deeper connection with Christ. Beautiful. I love that for him, right? But for others, when they come in with a certain belief system, that could just reinforce their beliefs. From a facilitator standpoint, that can reinforce the facilitator's beliefs. And so one of the facilitators that came through our program, he's been ayahuasquero for 15 years. Beautiful man with a beautiful voice. And we had a participant come in who's been suffering from extraordinary anxiety and treatment-resistant depression for 40 years, taking pills every day for 40 years. It's really tough. Okay? And would experience terror on a regular basis. And in the ceremony, she started experiencing terror. So what he did is he came up to her, put his hands above her, and started chanting. And after the ceremony, she said, "This man healed me." She would come again to the retreat with this intention of finding out what's next for her. But in the first ceremony, she again experienced terror. And she's like, "I thought this was gone." But what I shared with my co-facilitators is the reason why she's back here is to actually repair the damage that was done the first time around. Because no one outside of you, whether it's a medicine or a facilitator, heals you. Only you heal yourself. And anytime we believe something out there is effectuating something in here, we're disempowering ourselves. And I believe that so much of this direction that we're going that is benefited from or accelerated by plant medicine is towards that self-empowerment. And so facilitators are so important because if you go to a facilitator, I always recommend this. If you go to a facilitator and you challenge their beliefs, right? They say, you ask them, "What do you believe in?" And they tell you, and you say, "How do you know that to be true?" And if they respond with anger or frustration or just trust me, probably not the right person because they're probably not going to leave room for you to discover your own beliefs. And there's so much out there because the more psychedelics that these facilitators do, it can reinforce their beliefs. And for them to say, "Oh, what I believe is right and what you believe is wrong. And you need to open your eyes to see what I see."
All right, rapid fire. So combo, Iboga, and bufo. Have you done it? You've done
Oh, bufo, yes.
bufo, yes, but not Iboga and not combo. Okay.
Yes.
All three? Okay. So do you recommend each one of them? And is there any you don't recommend? And if not, why?
Oof. Very situationally. So Iboga, I also feel is really important to speak about because in Colorado, what is legalizing is psilocybin, DMT, and ibogaine. DMT being the active psychotropic compound in ayahuasca, and bufo, aka 5-MeO-DMT, and ibogaine being the active molecule in Iboga, which is the West African root bark. Iboga, when taken as a plant in ceremony, is a 36-hour experience. When I did it, we started around 3 a.m. I saw sunrise, sunset, sunrise, sunset, sunrise, lying prone on the mat. And I went to the bathroom twice during that time. Most people went once or not at all because it is so painful and so nauseating to move. We literally have to crawl on the ground because it feels like Drake's Passage.
All right. I'm not doing it.
But it was so worth it.
It was so worth it?
Oh, yeah. So ibogaine is widely theorized to be the best psychedelic for addiction. Okay. Much of the research is around healing addiction. And Robert Carr Harris is doing a lot of research on this. It's beautiful work. The way I look at psilocybin or ayahuasca is the medicine kind of shows you or helps you see this is the truth of who you are and what you're not willing to see. Look at me. That's what it does, right? And your ego takes a step back. Iboga is, I think, the opposite. It puts your ego front and center. They say you have 50,000 thoughts a day. Imagine if you could hear every thought turned to volume 10, right? It was a hunting medicine in West Africa, in Gabon. And so they would take it to amplify your senses like Wolverine from Marvel Comics, right? They could hear further, they could see further with more detail and clarity. And what that showed me was all the thoughts that I was not willing to see. It also showed me just how many thoughts I had. And was one thing that was really wild for me is so much of what I saw was in cartoons. And I thought to myself afterwards, the meaning making I came up with is like, the reason was because as a kid, I watched so much cartoons to actually distract me from my own experience of self. Imagine if I grew up as in monkhood or, raised by monks like the Dalai Lama, where you're not distracting yourself. Instead, you're going inwards and being with yourself all the time. The richness of what we can find underneath that I'm only now discovering more and more of. And so what I was not willing to see were all the self-talk, all the mechanisms of distraction that were there that I was not even consciously aware of, right? And, insofar as addiction, that's really what's happening. It's a distraction from what I'm feeling now, because what I'm feeling now is so hard that I want to dissociate from it, whether that's alcohol or drugs or porn or whatever it was, I'm just trying to get out of me now. But Iboga says, this is everything you're thinking now. You cannot avoid it. At 36 hours, let me tell you, feels like 36 lifetimes.
A lot of therapy.
Do you recommend bufo?
I think, of course I do, but I think that it's an experience that can connect you with the whole, with the void that we are in such a beautiful way that literally you become God for a few seconds and you can see everything and feel everything. And suddenly something amazing happens, which is you disappear. Like the ego disappear in such a beautiful way. But I don't think it's first thing to do. And I think it's something that it requires a pursuit of yourself beyond yourselves. I wouldn't recommend that. I would say it is literally something that you need to be prepared for. And you really need to feel that you are ready to let yourself go completely, to create a new version.
Where can people find out about your work, just in general, for you, Matias? Just Google Matias. He's like Madonna. He only needs one name.
Let's Google Matias. Crazy shit.
Crazy shit. You don't even need the crazy shit. What about for you, Austin?
Well, you can't just Google Austin crazy shit. You can find us on ceremoniacircle.org, Instagram, Ceremonia Circle. I'm at Austin Mao. There's a lot of content out there. We're one of the leading institutions in the United States that is working with psilocybin and ayahuasca and pursuing the regulated, legalized model in Colorado.
Thank you for trailblazing. And for those that are interested, I can also be found at robertedwardgrant.com and the same name on Instagram and all the social media platforms.
I have a burning question for you.
Sure.
What's it like to have 3 first names?
You know what? Someone told me the other day, it's like, if you have 3 first names, then you know what you're doing. I don't know what that means, but I think it was in some context.
Well, this has been awesome. I hope you all enjoyed this and so much fun.
Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us on this episode of Modern Enlightenment. If you enjoyed today's conversation, be sure to check out our website, subscribe to our online community, and check out our social media links in the show notes for more resources and updates.
And don't forget to subscribe to our podcast to stay connected with our upcoming episodes, where we continue to explore the intersection of modern science and spiritual wisdom. Until next time, stay curious, stay inspired, and keep shining your light.